Robert Sterling always believed he was a man built for the second act. The first act, he'd tell his reflection in the custom-lit bathroom mirror, was necessary grunt work. It was the sensible sedan, the mortgage in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the nice, predictable wife, Susan. It was the two kids, Clara and James, who grew up knowing the smell of freshly cut grass and the sound of their father's key turning in the lock at 8 p.m. sharp. But Robert, pushing 58, didn't want sensible anymore. He wanted shiny. He wanted fast. So he executed his second act with the same ruthless precision he applied to corporate mergers. He shed the old life like an unnecessary skin. It took 6 months. 6 months of legal maneuvering, massive payouts, and cold, deliberate phone calls that ended 30 years of shared history. Susan got the house, the substantial alimony, and the quiet dignity of a woman who knew she was trading a fading executive for perpetual comfort. The children were harder, not emotionally, but financially. They were adults, both in their early 30s. James, the son, was a bit aimless, but took the large settlement. Robert called it a severance package, without much fuss. Clara, the daughter, was different. Clara was sharp. She was a lawyer herself, though not the corporate kind. She didn't want the money, not really, but Robert insisted. He wanted a clean break, a signed contract stating they were square. "This is transactional, Dad," Clara had said over the phone, her voice flat, devoid of the familiar spark of anger or sadness, just pure, professional disappointment. "You're buying your freedom from obligation." "I am securing my future, Clara," Robert had corrected, standing in his new minimalist apartment high above Central Park. "I am choosing happiness." "Happiness is portable, Robert. Obligation is heavy. Enjoy the lightness." And with that, she hung up. Robert didn't call back. He felt a profound sense of relief. The anchors were gone. His new life was Tiffany. Tiffany was 28, blonde, perpetually tan, and smelled like expensive French perfume and ambition. She wasn't interested in talking about Robert's day at the investment firm. She was interested in which Caribbean island they should visit next, and whether the new Aston Martin should be black or silver. This was exactly what Robert wanted. No emotional labor, just consumption. They lived in a glass box on the 48th floor of a new building on the Upper West Side, a place so modern it felt less like a home and more like a high-end luxury hotel suite that Robert never had to check out of. Every piece of furniture was sleek, Italian, and utterly uncomfortable. Robert loved it. It was proof he had arrived, finally escaping the suffocating middle-class success he had built with Susan. He told his friends, the few he kept, mostly business associates who admired his audacity, that Tiffany kept him young. What he didn't admit was that Tiffany was essentially furniture, exceptionally beautiful, high-maintenance furniture that required constant maintenance in the form of diamond jewelry and travel. But she didn't criticize him, didn't ask him to attend neighborhood gatherings, and certainly never mentioned his mortality. Life was a blur of high-stakes deals, expensive wine, and late nights where he felt invincible, powered by the sheer force of his bank account and Tiffany's youth radiating next to him. This went on for 3 glorious, self-indulgent years. It was a Tuesday morning, humid and grey outside. Robert was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, talking to his VP of acquisitions about a merger in Dallas. He was feeling particularly sharp. He had just closed a deal that would net him a substantial bonus, enough to buy Tiffany that little cottage in the Hamptons she'd been hinting at. Tiffany was still asleep, draped elegantly under a silk duvet. The apartment was silent, save for Robert's booming, confident voice. "Look, David, we go in hard. We don't negotiate past the initial offer. They're weak. We know they're weak. We are the rescue, but we demand the fee for the extraction." "Understood." Robert paused, waiting for the VP's agreement. He lifted his coffee cup to his lips, a fancy artisanal blend that Tiffany insisted on, and that's when the first wave hit. It wasn't a sharp pain, not like in the movies. It was a sudden, profound wrongness. The entire right side of his body felt heavy, alien. The coffee cup, which had been perfectly balanced, suddenly slipped, crashing onto the polished concrete floor. Robert tried to curse, to express his frustration at the mess, but the words wouldn't form. They were stuck, thick and clumsy, behind his teeth. He felt his face drooping, pulling downward as if gravity had decided to focus entirely on one side of his head. He gripped the window frame with his left hand, the world tilting violently. He tried to tell David on the phone that he had to hang up, but only a gurgling, meaningless sound came out. He sounded like a broken machine. He looked down at his right hand, the one that had just dropped the coffee. He tried to command it to move, to clench, to show dominance over this sudden betrayal. Nothing. It just hung there, useless. The phone slipped from his shoulder, hitting the floor and bouncing away. Panic, cold and absolute, finally broke through the arrogance. This isn't happening. I don't get sick. I don't break. He stumbled, the coordination gone. His body hit the sleek Italian sofa and he slid, ending up crumpled on the cold floor, half under the cocktail table. He could hear his own ragged breathing, but he couldn't speak, couldn't summon the words to shout for Tiffany. Tiffany, hearing the crash, finally stirred. She sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, looking annoyed rather than concerned. "Robert, what was that? Did you break the Nespresso machine again?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. He tried to wave his left arm, desperately trying to signal the severity of the situation. His mouth struggled to form a plea. Help. Ambulance. Tiffany finally swung her legs out of bed. She was wearing a silk slip, and she looked down at him, her beautiful face momentarily registering confusion, then immediate disgust. He was drooling slightly, and his right eye seemed to be staring off into the distance. "Oh, Jesus, Robert," she whispered, taking a step back. "Are you drunk? It's 9 a.m. He shook his head violently, a desperate, silent denial. She didn't rush to him. She didn't check his pulse or try to lift him. Instead, she took out her phone. Robert felt a flicker of hope. She was calling for help, but she wasn't. She walked quickly into the master bathroom, shutting the door. Robert could faintly hear her voice, low and urgent, but definitely not speaking to 911. He lay there, paralyzed on the right side, his mind screaming in a prison of flesh that refused to cooperate. He was utterly helpless. The man who controlled boardrooms and futures was now a puddle on his expensive floor. When Tiffany emerged 10 minutes later, she was fully dressed. Jeans, a designer sweater, and her hair perfectly fixed. She was carrying a large, expensive leather tote bag. She didn't look at Robert. She walked straight to the safe hidden behind a piece of abstract art. Robert watched, horrified, as she expertly opened it. She knew the combination, of course, and swiftly began sweeping the contents into her bag. Stacks of cash, his reserve of gold coins, and the heavy velvet box containing the diamond necklace he had bought her last Christmas. "I called a friend, Robert," she said, her tone businesslike, almost apologetic, like cancelling a dinner reservation. "He's a lawyer. He said I need to protect myself. This isn't what I signed up for." She glanced at him then, her blue eyes cold and utterly empty of affection. "I'm sorry, but I can't handle this kind of mess. You need family for this, darling. I'm just a companion." She zipped up the bag. She walked to the front door, slipping on her high-heeled boots. "I'll have the building concierge send someone up to check on you eventually. Good luck, Robert. Get well soon." The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the massive, sterile apartment. Robert lay there for what felt like an eternity, the silence rushing back in, heavy and oppressive. He was alone, utterly, completely alone, just hours after believing he had everything he had ever wanted. It was the building superintendent who found him, alerted by Robert's corporate assistant who couldn't reach him and knew he was never late for a meeting. The superintendent called 911 and the EMTs arrived, cutting away Robert's expensive clothes and strapping him onto a gurney. The diagnosis was grim: massive ischemic stroke affecting the left hemisphere, significant paralysis and aphasia. He was alive, but the man everyone knew was gone, trapped somewhere behind damaged synapses. At the hospital, New York Presbyterian, a place Robert usually only visited to donate large sums of money, not as a patient, the social workers and doctors hit an immediate roadblock. Who was next of kin? They found the old records. The first name listed was Susan Sterling, his ex-wife. The hospital called Susan. She listened politely to the clinical details. "I'm sorry, but Robert and I have been divorced for 3 years," Susan said calmly to the social worker. "I have no legal standing, and I certainly have no emotional inclination to make medical decisions for him. You need to contact his children. Clara Sterling is the eldest. She lives downtown." Susan provided Clara's contact information, then hung up and went back to tending her garden, feeling nothing but a profound, settled peace. Clara Sterling was exactly where she always was on a Tuesday afternoon, in the thick of it. She was in the back office of a non-profit legal aid organization in Brooklyn, juggling 3 pro bono cases for clients facing eviction. Her life was practical, messy, and decidedly unglamorous. She wore sensible shoes, and her dark hair was pulled back into a functional ponytail. When her desk phone rang, the emergency line, not her cell, she answered with a crisp, "Legal aid, Clara speaking." The voice on the other end was formal, clinical. It was a Ms. Evans from New York Presbyterian. "Ms. Sterling, we are calling regarding Mr. Robert Sterling. He was admitted this morning following a severe medical event." Clara paused, her pen hovering over a court document. Robert. The name felt distant, like an old character in a book she hadn't read in years. "Is he all right?" Clara asked, not out of concern, but out of necessity. She needed to know if she was about to be dragged into a legal mess. Ms. Evans summarized the situation. The stroke, the severity, the non-responsive state. "We need a legally recognized next of kin to discuss his current prognosis and treatment options, specifically regarding power of attorney and preliminary end-of-life directives," Ms. Evans concluded. "It appears Mr. Sterling did not update his files following his divorce, and the woman who was with him left the scene before police arrived." Clara felt a grim, bitter satisfaction curl in her gut. Tiffany. Of course, Tiffany had bolted. The moment the champagne turned to sewage, she was gone. That was the contract Robert had unknowingly signed. "I see," Clara said, pushing the bitterness down. She had worked too hard to let this sudden, traumatic event pull her back into the vortex of Robert's life. "Mr. Sterling, are you willing to come in? We need someone to make decisions. If no family member steps forward, the state will assign a guardian, which complicates everything." Clara looked around her small, cluttered office. She had a mountain of work, and more importantly, she had built a wall between herself and this man. A wall of justified resentment and carefully constructed indifference. But she was a lawyer. She understood legal necessity. If she didn't step in, the state might bankrupt her mother or brother sorting out the estate, or worse, make decisions Robert, however flawed, would have hated. "I need to be clear, Ms. Evans," Clara said, her voice sharp and steady. "I have no personal relationship with Mr. Sterling. We are estranged. I am not coming there to hold his hand or offer comfort. If I come, it is purely as a legal representative to ensure the necessary forms are signed and that his affairs do not burden the rest of the family. Is that understood?" There was a slight pause on the other end. "Understood, Ms. Sterling. We just need a signature and a decision maker. When can you arrive?" "Give me 2 hours," Clara replied. She hung up, leaned back in her chair, and rubbed her temples. The irony was suffocating. Robert had spent 3 years meticulously clearing his life of family obligation, only for the one person he had most deliberately pushed away to be the only one left to clean up the pieces. She stood up, grabbed her sensible black briefcase, and headed for the subway. She felt no grief, no rush of filial devotion, just a deep, cold sense of duty. This was closure, she realized. The final, terrible chapter of a story she had been trying to finish for years. The hospital was antiseptic and cold, smelling of bleach and despair, a stark contrast to the polished marble and expensive woods of Robert's Manhattan apartment. Clara approached the ICU desk. She gave her name and was immediately ushered into a small, windowless conference room by Ms. Evans, the social worker, a woman with kind, weary eyes. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Sterling," Ms. Evans said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "We know this is difficult." "It's necessary," Clara corrected, opening the file immediately, skipping past the medical jargon and going straight to the legal forms. "Let's focus on the medical power of attorney. Does he have a living will?" "Nothing current. His previous documents named his ex-wife Susan." Clara nodded grimly. "Expected. So we need to establish me as the proxy decision-maker immediately. I assume he is currently unresponsive and unlikely to regain capacity in the immediate future. That is the preliminary assessment. We need to prepare you for the reality, Ms. Sterling. His neurological deficits are extensive. He may never speak or move his right side again. He will require long-term care, likely institutionalized." Clara absorbed the information without flinching. This was the Robert Sterling who had been a titan, reduced to a legal liability and a medical problem. What is the financial status? Does he have long-term care insurance? Where are his primary assets? Clara asked, immediately shifting into asset protection mode. She needed to ensure her mother and brother weren't somehow legally liable for the massive medical bills that were already accumulating. Ms. Evans frowned slightly. That's another complication. When the police searched his residence, they found evidence that large amounts of cash and jewelry were removed. The building manager confirmed that the woman, Ms. Tiffany Hayes, vacated the premises shortly after Mr. Sterling was transported. She left no forwarding address. Clara almost laughed. Tiffany had taken the escape route and the treasure. Robert had paid a high price for a transactional relationship, and now the transaction was complete. So the mistress cleared the accounts and vanished, Clara summarized, signing the power of attorney form with a decisive flourish. Perfectly predictable. We are trying to contact his financial manager, Ms. Evans continued, looking slightly unnerved by Clara's lack of emotion. But right now, we need to focus on his immediate care plan. The doctors would like you to see him. Clara hesitated. She had managed to keep her focus purely legal. Seeing him would make it real, and reality was messy. Is that medically necessary? She asked. No, but often seeing the patient helps the family understand the gravity of the situation. Ms. Evans insisted gently. Clara sighed. Fine, but just 5 minutes. I have to get back to work. The intensive care unit was a maze of beeping machines and hushed whispers. Robert Sterling lay in bed 3, surrounded by technology that was keeping him alive. When Clara walked in, the first thing she noticed was how small he looked. Robert had always been imposing, a big man with a booming voice and shoulders that seemed too wide for any doorway. Now, under the thin white hospital sheet, he looked frail, almost skeletal. His face, normally ruddy with health and expensive wine, was pale. The right side was slack, the mouth slightly open. A tube ran into his nose, and several IV lines snaked into his left arm. The Robert Sterling she remembered, the sharp, critical man who had judged her career choices and lectured her about corporate ambition, was gone. This was just a shell. Clara walked to the bedside, her sensible shoes silent on the linoleum floor. She looked down at him, searching for some flicker of recognition, some sign of the man who had been her father, however terrible he had been in the end. Nothing. His eyes were open, staring blankly at the ceiling tiles, but they didn't track her movement. She felt a strange, detached curiosity. Was he in there? Could he hear the monotonous beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor? Could he understand that his lavish, carefully constructed new life had collapsed the moment his body failed him? She reached out her left hand, hovering it over his immobile right hand, the hand that had signed countless contracts, the hand that had signed the divorce papers, the hand that had signed her severance package. She didn't touch him. "This is it, Robert," she whispered, her voice low so the nurse at the station wouldn't hear. "This is what you traded everything for." There was no response, of course. "You wanted freedom from obligation," she continued, a hard, cold edge entering her voice. "You bought yourself a sleek temporary life and cut us all out. And now the temporary life has abandoned you, and the obligation you rejected is the only thing left. I am here because I have to be, because the paperwork requires it." She paused, watching his chest rise and fall rhythmically. She felt the heavy weight of her own history with him, the disappointment, the fights, the final surgical cut 3 years ago. "I won't let you die alone, Dad," she finished, using the word dad for the first time in years, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "But don't mistake that for forgiveness. This is just cleanup. I'm here to make sure you get the proper ending, not the happy one." She turned, walking away from the bed. She didn't look back. She had seen what she needed to see, the terrible physical reality of his fall. Now, she could go back to the conference room and get to work making decisions. Ms. Evans met her outside the room. "How are you feeling, Ms. Sterling?" Clara straightened her jacket. "I feel ready to sign the DNR if necessary and figure out the long-term facility options. Let's discuss his financial exposure." Clara had arrived. The estranged daughter had taken control, not with love, but with a briefcase full of legal documents and 3 years of carefully cultivated spite. The cleanup had begun. The problem with being a crisis manager is that you have to manage the crisis. And the crisis Robert Sterling had created was a towering mountain of financial and medical liability. Clara spent the next 72 hours living in a grey, fluorescent-lit haze, powered by stale coffee and sheer legal adrenaline. She met with Mr. Henderson, Robert's long-time financial advisor, a man whose face was pale with shock and embarrassment. "It's not good, Ms. Sterling," Mr. Henderson admitted, fiddling with his expensive tie. Mr. Sterling, in the last 3 years, liquidated almost all his readily accessible assets. He was spending, lavishly. The Hamptons property fund? Gone. The majority of his liquid investments reallocated into jewelry and travel. Clara leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "How much was taken by Ms. Hayes?" "We can't know precisely, but based on the safe's contents and the last few large withdrawals, we estimate upwards of 7 figures in cash and easily movable assets." Henderson sighed. "She was efficient." Clara nodded. Efficient was Robert's favorite word. He had taught the young woman well, perhaps too well. The irony was brutal. Robert was a man worth tens of millions on paper, in corporate stocks, real estate holdings, and various complex investment funds that were locked up tight. But the immediate need was liquidity. The hospital bills were already stacking up like luxury condos, and long-term care in a facility that wouldn't feel like a poorly funded prison was going to cost a fortune, potentially draining the estate before his family could secure anything. Clara, the legal aid lawyer who usually fought for the little guy, was now fighting to protect the massive, ill-gotten wealth of the man who had abandoned her. She saw the twisted justice in it. Robert's money would now be entirely consumed by the consequences of his actions. She spent hours on the phone freezing accounts, selling off non-essential, easily disposable assets, like the ridiculous Aston Martin Robert had barely driven, and navigating the labyrinth of his complex corporate portfolio. She was operating purely on instinct and professional training, suppressing any personal feeling that might slow her down. She knew she had to call James and Susan. This was the part she dreaded the most, not because of the emotion, but because she had to drag them back into Robert's orbit. She called her mother first, late that evening. Susan answered on the first ring, her voice calm and measured. "Hello, Clara. I figured you'd call." "Mum, he had a massive stroke. He's a New York Presbyterian. He's paralyzed on the right side and has severe aphasia. He can't communicate." Clara delivered the news like a police report. She heard a soft intake of breath on the other end, but no tears. "Poor Robert," Susan finally said, the words heavy with a profound lack of sympathy. "He always pushed too hard. What about the blonde?" Tiffany cleared the apartment and vanished with the cash and jewelry before the EMTs arrived. Susan let out a sharp, short laugh. It wasn't a happy sound, but one of grim validation. Of course she did. Robert always confused price tags with loyalty. "Did you sign the papers?" "I signed the power of attorney. I am the decision maker. I've started liquidating assets to cover his care." "Good," Susan said. "Do what you have to do, honey. Protect the estate from the state, but don't spend a single moment grieving the man he became. I won't visit. I made my peace 3 years ago, and I am not going back to that life, not even for a wake. But if you need any old passwords or names of his ancient contacts, I remember everything." Susan's pragmatism was a comfort. Her mother had found true freedom, not in a new life, but in the complete eradication of her dependence on Robert. James, however, was a disaster. Clara called her brother the next morning. James, who worked vaguely in film production and still relied on Robert's severance package to pay his rent in Santa Monica, answered with a cheerful, "Hey, what's up?" "James, Dad is in the hospital. Stroke. It's severe." The cheer evaporated. "What, is he going to be okay?" "Wait, Tiffany told me they were going to the Maldives next week. What happened?" Clara explained the clinical details, then the financial betrayal. "She cleaned him out? The bitch? Wait, does this mean the money is gone? What about my inheritance? He promised me that trust fund would be liquid by 60. James wailed, the focus immediately shifting from his father's life to his own financial security. Clara pinched the bridge of her nose. "James, the man is fighting for his life, and you're worried about a hypothetical trust fund. I am trying to secure his long-term care and prevent the state from seizing the corporate assets. No, the money isn't gone, but a significant amount of cash is missing. And the medical bills will be massive. I need you to stay calm and stay out of the way." "But I should fly back. I should be there, right? I'm his son," James insisted, suddenly trying to perform filial piety over the phone. "No, James, you shouldn't," Clara cut him off sharply. "The only thing you would accomplish is running up an airline bill and asking me how much we can salvage. Stay in California. I will handle the cleanup. This is a legal problem, not a family reunion." She hung up before James could protest further. The calls confirmed what she already knew. She was alone in this. No one else was willing or able to deal with the cold, hard reality of Robert Sterling's fall. The next phase was the worst. The search for a long-term care facility. New York City was a place of extremes. You could find facilities that were essentially luxurious, private apartments with 24/7 nursing care, costing the equivalent of a small country's GDP per month. Or you could find state-subsidized nursing homes that smelled of old urine and neglect, where Robert, the corporate titan, would certainly wither and die quickly. Clara felt the weight of the moral dilemma pressing down on her. Robert had been cruel to her. He had valued her less than a diamond necklace. Yet, she was the guardian of his dignity, such as it was. "We need to be realistic about the remaining liquid assets," Mr. Henderson advised in a subsequent meeting. "If we put him in the top-tier facility, the estate will be gone in 18 months. You, your mother, and your brother would be left with nothing but corporate stock that won't mature for years." Clara looked at the brochures. The glossy images of sunrooms and specialized therapy pools mocked her. "Robert had a standard of living," Clara said, running a finger over a photo of a private suite. "He would despise the thought of being neglected. He also signed a document stating he was cutting you and your brother off, Miss Sterling," Henderson reminded her gently. "Your obligation is purely legal, not emotional. You must consider the beneficiaries." The beneficiaries. That was the rub. She wasn't fighting for her own comfort. She was fighting to ensure James didn't suffer financial ruin, and that her mother, Susan, who had earned her peace, wasn't dragged into bankruptcy court by the hospital. "We will find a middle ground," Clara decided. "A facility that offers specialized stroke rehabilitation and around-the-clock nursing, but we need to negotiate the price down. I want to reserve at least 5 years of care before we have to touch the long-term, non-liquid assets." She toured 3 facilities that week. Each one was a fresh assault on her nerves. The forced cheerfulness of the staff, the smell of institutional food, the sight of other residents trapped like Robert, staring blankly into space. At the third place, a highly rated rehabilitation center on the Upper East Side, the director, a woman named Beverly, was explaining the aquatic therapy program. Clara stopped listening when she saw a man slumped in a wheelchair, crying silently, his caregiver nowhere in sight. She fled the building and stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the polluted Manhattan air like it was mountain spring water. She felt sick. She was spending all her time dealing with the wreckage of a life she hated, neglecting the work she actually cared about. The eviction cases, the advocacy for the truly powerless. Her colleagues in Brooklyn were covering for her, sending worried texts. "Why are you doing this, Clara?" The voice in her head screamed. "Let the state handle it. Let him suffer the consequences." But every time that thought surfaced, she remembered Robert, small and pale in the hospital bed, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. He had been a monster of selfishness, but he was still a man, and he was completely defenseless. To abandon him now felt like stooping to his level of cruelty. Weeks bled into a month. Robert was moved out of the ICU and into a private room in the specialized neuro-rehabilitation wing. He was stable, but his prognosis hadn't changed. He was a permanent resident of the silent world of aphasia. Clara established a grim routine. Every Friday afternoon, after she finished her court appointments, she took the subway uptown. She brought him his mail, sorted through the endless corporate paperwork that still flowed to him, and met with his physical therapists. She never stayed long, 15 minutes, maximum. She always stood, never sat. One Friday, she walked in and found him awake. A physical therapist, a young, earnest man named Marcus, was gently moving Robert's useless right arm. Robert's eyes tracked Clara as she entered. It was the first sign of genuine recognition she had seen. His left hand, the functional one, twitched slightly on the sheet. Clara felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. Her armor, which had been impenetrable when he was unresponsive, suddenly felt thin. "Hello, Robert," she said, her voice strictly neutral. "I brought the latest reports from Henderson. We've managed to secure the funding for the UES facility. You move next week." Robert made a sound. It was a thick, guttural noise, part frustration, part attempt at speech. Marcus, the therapist, encouraged him. "That's good, Mr. Sterling. Try to tell Clara thank you." Robert strained. His face contorted, the slack right side pulling downward, making him look grotesque. He tried again. The sounds that emerged were meaningless syllables, a desperate, broken attempt to shape language. Clara watched this struggle, and for the first time since she arrived at the hospital, she felt a profound wave of pity, a terrible, unwanted emotion. This man, who had built his empire on words, on cutting remarks and sharp negotiations, was now trapped in silence. He couldn't even apologize, couldn't ask for forgiveness, couldn't even curse her. His ultimate punishment was the removal of his primary weapon, his voice. "Don't strain yourself," Clara said quickly, turning away, pretending to examine a chart hanging on the wall. "The reports are fine. We've filed the insurance claims. Everything is handled." She felt his gaze on her back. It was heavy, demanding. She turned back, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "Look, Robert, we are doing this efficiently. You will have the best care available that doesn't completely bankrupt the estate. You will live. That's the best I can promise you." She could see the terror in his eyes now, the stark realization of his utter dependence. He wanted to speak, to assert dominance, to demand control, but he couldn't. "I need to go," Clara said, suddenly needing air. As she reached the door, Robert's functional left hand shot out and gripped the edge of the sheet, pulling it taut. He made that raw, desperate sound again, but this time it was laced with something different, a plea. Clara stopped. She didn't move toward him, but she paused, her hand on the doorknob. "What is it, Robert?" she asked, her voice weary. He stared at her, his eyes wide and wet, and with his left hand he slowly, painstakingly, pointed toward the small bedside table. Clara frowned, walking over. On the table, nestled between a half-empty water pitcher and a copy of the hospital menu, was his wedding ring. The heavy gold band he had worn for 30 years, the one he had taken off the day he moved out of the Greenwich house and started his second act. Tiffany must have tossed it onto the table as she left, a final, meaningless gesture of contempt. Clara picked up the ring. It was cold and heavy. It was a relic of the life he had discarded, the life with Susan, with the freshly cut grass, and with his 2 children. He was staring at the ring in her hand, his eyes demanding something. "Do you want me to put it back on?" she asked, holding it up. Robert closed his eyes once slowly. "Yes." Clara hesitated. Putting the ring back on felt like a symbolic act, a reversal of his grand, catastrophic mistake. It felt like admitting that the second act was a failure, and the first act was the only reality that mattered. She looked at his slack, ruined hand. She looked at the ring. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You took it off. You decided what that meant. I am not rewriting your history for you." She dropped the ring back onto the table, where it landed with a soft, metallic thud. "I will see you next week, Robert." And she left, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was shaken, not by pity, but by the overwhelming, almost suffocating power she now held over him. She was the gatekeeper to his future, the curator of his memories, and the only person who remembered the full price of his freedom. The move to the rehabilitation facility, the Riverview, was scheduled for the following Tuesday. It was an expensive place, but Clara had negotiated a rate that was just sustainable. In the days leading up to the transfer, she had to clear out Robert's lavish Upper West Side apartment. She had been avoiding this task, knowing it would be a painful immersion into the gilded, empty world he had built with Tiffany. She brought James with her, mostly to give him something physical to do and to shut him up about the inheritance. James flew in reluctantly, complaining about the expense and the weather. "This place is incredible," James muttered, walking through the minimalist living room, touching the cold, sleek surfaces. "Looks like a museum. Can we sell this furniture?" "It's mostly custom and Italian," Clara replied, looking around at the sterile perfection. "Not much resale value. We're here for his personal effects, not the decor. Check the closets." The apartment felt haunted. Every surface was spotless, reflecting the city skyline. It was the antithesis of the warm, cluttered Connecticut home they grew up in. This apartment had no history, no comfort, only status. As James began rummaging through the absurdly large walk-in closet filled with bespoke suits Robert would never wear again, Clara went into the master bedroom. She opened the drawers of the bedside table where the wedding ring had been. It was empty, save for a small, worn leather address book tucked deep in the back. Not a digital device, but an old-fashioned personalized address book, slightly dog-eared. Curious, Clara pulled it out. It wasn't the corporate contacts. Those were all digital. This looked older. She opened it. The handwriting was Robert's, his neat, precise corporate script. The entries were alphabetized. She flipped past A, Airlines Amex, and B, Broker, Bentley Dealer. Under C, she found Clara Sterling, 128, Court St. Brooklyn. Office, Clara Sterling, Cell, Do Not Call. Below that, another entry, written in a smaller, almost hesitant hand, different from his usual confident scrawl. C, Home, Old number, removed 2018. 2018. That was the year he signed the divorce papers and bought the Upper West Side apartment. The year he systematically deleted his old life. Clara's throat tightened. He had kept her contact information even when he forbade himself from using it. He hadn't just erased them, he had archived them, placing them in a separate folder labeled The Past. She continued flipping. Under J, James Sterling, CA, Cell. Under S, Susan Sterling, Greenwich, Home. Then she reached T. She expected Tiffany's name to be highlighted, perhaps bolded with affection or marked as urgent contact. There was no Tiffany Hayes. Instead, there was a single, cryptic entry. T, travel agent. That was it. The woman he had traded his family for, the one who smelled of French perfume and ambition, was listed not as a partner, but as a service provider, a travel agent. Clara felt a sudden, profound coldness, deeper than the hospital's air conditioning. Robert hadn't just replaced his family with a mistress, he had replaced them with transactions. Tiffany was merely a highly specialized, very expensive service he had hired to manufacture the illusion of youth and happiness. And when the service failed, she simply collected her fee and logged off. Clara stood there holding the small, damning book. It was proof that Robert's second act wasn't about love or passion. It was about control and consumption, right up until the very end. "Find anything interesting?" James called from the closet, dragging out a massive suitcase. Clara quickly tucked the address book into her briefcase, next to the power of attorney forms. "No," she lied. "Just old paperwork. Let's focus on packing the essentials." The transfer to the Riverview was smooth, impersonal, and expensive. Clara signed the final documents, handed over the medical history, and watched as Robert was wheeled into his sterile private suite, which overlooked the East River. She came the following Saturday, a day she usually spent catching up on pro bono work. She hadn't consciously planned the visit. She just found herself on the subway, heading uptown. When she arrived, she found Robert strapped into a specialized armchair, staring out the window at the distant Queen's skyline. He was wearing an institutional blue robe, his hair neatly combed. He looked better than he had in the hospital, but still terribly diminished. "Robert," she greeted him. He turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a new intensity there, a desperate intelligence trapped behind the faulty wiring. Clara pulled out the address book. "I found this at the apartment, in your bedside table." She opened it to the page where her name was listed, the old, archived number of her previous life. "You kept us listed," she observed, holding the book so he could see it with his functioning left eye. "But you kept Tiffany filed under travel agent. You were never planning on making her permanent, were you?" Robert's left hand twitched, trying to reach for the book. He made a low, mournful sound. "Don't bother trying to explain," Clara continued, her voice low and steady. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you spent 3 years erasing us, telling yourself you were free, only to end up here, relying entirely on the legal necessity of the family you discarded." She walked closer, placing her hands on the armrests of his chair, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. She wanted to see the truth in his eyes. "Do you understand what I'm saying, Robert? Do you understand the cosmic joke of this?" His eyes were full of tears now, sliding silently down the immobile right side of his face. He nodded his head once, a slow, laborious movement. He understood. He was in there. The sight of his tears didn't soften Clara. Instead, they hardened her resolve. These weren't tears of remorse for his actions. They were tears of self-pity for his current predicament. "Good," she said, straightening up. "Because I need you to understand that I am not here for redemption. I am here for closure. I am here to ensure that the fallout from your destructive choice doesn't ruin the lives of the people you tried to escape." She picked up a pamphlet from the table about speech therapy. "The therapists say you have a small window to regain some minimal communication. We start intensive therapy on Monday. We're going to work. Not because I care about your happiness, but because I need to know you are maximizing the investment I am making in your care." It was a cold declaration of war, dressed up as a care plan. Clara realized, looking at her father's ruined body and trapped mind, that this was her final brutal act of emotional self-preservation. She wouldn't allow herself to forgive him, because forgiveness would mean letting go of the justified anger that had protected her for 3 years. But Robert, reduced to this state, could only respond with silence and the terrible eloquence of his gaze. The weeks turned into months, and Clara's Friday visits became a fixed point in both their lives. For Robert, she was the only consistent visitor. James called occasionally, mostly asking Clara to sell some stock to cover his business expenses. Susan sent flowers to the staff, but never to the room. Clara never brought flowers. She brought work. She brought bills. She brought the constant driving pressure of expectation. She sat in the room while the speech therapist, a woman named Denise, tried to coax sounds out of him. "Mr. Sterling, say Clara, just Clara. Focus on the C sound." Robert would try, his mouth struggling, producing only a raw, throaty noise. Clara would watch, detached but attentive. One afternoon, Denise stepped out to take a call, leaving Clara alone with Robert. He was resting, exhausted from the effort. Clara was reading a court filing, but she felt his eyes on her. She lowered the paper. "What is it, Robert?" He lifted his left hand slightly and pointed to the small television mounted high on the wall. The news was on, showing stock market reports. Clara sighed. "Yes, the Dow is up 300 points. Your portfolio is recovering slightly thanks to the efficiency of Mr. Henderson." Robert shook his head violently, a deep, frustrated movement. He pointed again, more urgently, then made a small gesture with his left index finger, drawing a circle in the air. Clara watched, confused. A circle? He tried the gesture again, then pointed to the screen, then to himself. Clara realized what he was trying to say. He was trying to ask about his former company, the world he had controlled. "Your old firm?" she asked. He nodded, a flicker of the old corporate fire in his eyes. "They merged," Clara reported flatly. "6 weeks ago. They took your name off the masthead. The new CEO is David. Remember David, your VP of acquisitions, the one you were talking to when you collapsed." Robert's eyes widened, filling with shock and disbelief. He tried to shout, but only a desperate wheeze escaped. "Yes, David," Clara confirmed, leaning in, her voice cold as ice. "He went in hard, Robert. He didn't negotiate past the initial offer. He demanded the fee for the extraction. You taught him well." She watched the realization sink in. The ultimate betrayal, executed with his own ruthless playbook. He had been so focused on shedding his family that he hadn't seen the corporate wolves closing in behind him. His legacy, his power was already gone, swallowed by the very machine he had created. Robert's face crumpled. He was weeping openly now, the tears streaming down both sides of his face, a silent, terrible breakdown. It wasn't the stroke that had broken him. It was the total failure of his second act, the loss of everything he truly valued, power and control. Clara watched him cry, feeling the weight of the moment. She could have offered comfort. She could have touched his arm, but she didn't. She simply observed the wreckage. This was the closure she had needed. Not forgiveness, but the absolute undeniable proof that the man who had chosen ambition over family had paid the ultimate price, and the only person left to witness his downfall was the daughter he had tried to erase. When Denise returned, Robert was still sobbing, his breathing ragged. "What happened?" Denise whispered, rushing to his side. Clara stood up, smoothing her jacket. "He just realized he lost the merger," Clara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "It was a necessary realization. I'll see you both next week." She left the Riverview, stepping back into the noise and chaos of the city. She didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted, heavy, but finally, irrevocably free. The cleanup was almost complete, and she was the only one who had survived the blast intact. 3 more months passed, folding the intense crisis management into history. The severe stroke was no longer a breaking headline. It was an item on a long-term care budget spreadsheet. Robert Sterling, the powerful executive, was now Robert Sterling, the resident of Suite 4B at the Riverview Rehabilitation Center. Clara's visits became less frequent, every other week, then sometimes just once a month. She had successfully stabilized the financial situation. She negotiated the sale of Robert's non-voting corporate stock, a complex maneuver that secured a substantial, if less glamorous, trust. This fund would cover Robert's care for the rest of his life and ensure a modest inheritance would eventually pass to James and Susan, fulfilling the final necessary act of asset protection. Her legal duty was nearly complete. The shift felt like shedding a heavy, expensive suit she had been forced to wear. Clara had found a professional fiduciary, a kind, older woman named Mrs. Davies, who specialized in managing the affairs of high-net-worth stroke patients. Mrs. Davies was hired to take over the daily administrative burden, ensuring Robert's care remained excellent, but removing Clara from the constant, draining emotional and logistical proximity. Clara was finally returning to her work in Brooklyn, the eviction cases and legal aid she actually cared about. She felt the heavy, cold obligation lifting, replaced by the familiar, messy satisfaction of fighting for the truly powerless. One crisp autumn afternoon, Clara drove her sensible car up to the Riverview for what she knew would be her final visit as the primary hands-on decision-maker. She carried a small, sealed envelope containing the finalized trust documents for Mrs. Davies. She found Robert in the common area, sitting by the tall windows wrapped in a blanket, watching the boats move slowly down the East River. He looked older, quieter. The corporate fire had gone out, replaced by a resigned stillness. Clara sat down in the chair opposite him, a small table separating them. She didn't offer a greeting, just placed the envelope on the table. "I've signed the final documents, Robert," she began, her voice low and professional. "Mrs. Davies is taking over as your trustee and guardian for daily management. She is excellent. She will ensure your care remains impeccable. I remain your legal proxy for medical decisions, should the need arise, but I won't be managing the details anymore." Robert turned his head toward her. He didn't try to speak, but his eyes held a complex mixture of fear and perhaps acceptance. He seemed to understand that the emergency phase was over, and the long, quiet wait had begun. "The assets are secure," Clara continued. "Your second act failed, but your estate is intact enough to cover the consequences. Your mother is fine. James, naturally, is already asking Mrs. Davies about quarterly distributions. That's James." She paused, letting the silence stretch. This wasn't about paperwork, it was about the final reckoning, the moment where she cut the final emotional thread. "I want you to understand why I stayed, Robert," Clara said, leaning slightly forward, her hands resting on the table. "It wasn't love, it wasn't forgiveness, it was necessity. You cut us off, believing that money could buy you freedom and youth. You thought obligation was the heaviest burden." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the small worn leather address book, the one she had retrieved from his bedside table, the one that listed her and her mother under archived contacts, and Tiffany under travel agent. She opened it to the blank page under T. "But freedom is an illusion and youth is temporary," she continued, her voice steady and clear. "When your body failed, the only currency that mattered was obligation. And I was the only one legally bound and professionally capable of fulfilling it." She tapped the address book. "Tiffany left when the transaction ended. She took her fee and vanished. But I stayed because I had to see the transaction completed. I am the consequence, Robert. I am the cleanup crew for the life you tried to abandon." She closed the book and looked directly into his eyes, which were wet with the familiar silent tears. "And now, my duty is done," she finished. "You are safe, you are provided for, and I am free." She stood up. This time there was no urgency, no need to flee the sterile environment. She simply stood, absorbing the moment, letting the finality settle over the room. Robert, using his good left hand, slowly raised it, his fingers trembling, and made the only gesture he seemed capable of communicating, a pathetic, slow attempt at a wave, a farewell, a final surrender. Clara didn't wave back. She nodded curtly. "Goodbye, Robert." She placed the address book next to the finalized documents for Mrs. Davies. It was his now, a physical record of the choices he had made. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving the quiet hum of the machines and the sight of the man staring out at the river. She didn't look back as she left the river view. She drove south, crossing the bridge, the cityscape transforming from the polished towers of Manhattan to the busy brick reality of Brooklyn. The next morning, Clara walked into the familiar, cluttered chaos of her legal aid office. Her colleagues cheered, welcoming her back. She sat down at her desk, pulled out a thick file for an eviction case, and opened her laptop. The feeling of heavy, cold obligation was gone. She had stared into the heart of her father's failure and emerged not bitter, but settled. She had done the right thing, for the wrong man, for the right reasons. She had given him the proper ending, not the happy one, and in doing so she had found her own peace. Clara Sterling was finally, truly free. The anchor that had held her to Robert's toxic orbit for 3 terrible months had finally been cut, not with a burst of emotion, but with the sharp precision of a lawyer's signature. The second act of Robert Sterling's life was over, and Clara was ready to start her own, entirely on her own terms.